Do you want
All
us
right.
on camera until you
Nope,
start?
we can turn
You
off
can turn off now.
cameras
Okay.
and mute now,
Can someone add me
except for
as a
Kiri.
co-host, actually?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
you're good.
Um,
This is why we have a practice session to start.
so yeah, it was being weird. I'm making you the host because it won't
Cool.
let me. There we go. Change to host. There you go. All
Right.
right. And
Let's
now we can
spotlight
go.
this. All right, good to go.
Yeah.
Starting webinar. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Minnesota NEET's Q3 webinar, Remote Support, What It Is and How It Works. We are excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are super excited to chat about this topic. I know there's a lot of questions around it. We have a bunch of our experts here today to talk about their expertise and then answer your questions from Ask the Expert at the end of our session. So my name is Kiri Tram. I'm the Director of Disability Initiatives here at LifeWorks, and I will be our MC for this morning. We're going to go over the agenda to start with and a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A. You can access that at the bottom of the panel. If you're not seeing that, feel free to click the More button with the 3 little dots and the Q&A should pop up. We will ask those if they're pertinent to the speaker right away. And if we don't have time or if they aren't super pertinent to what we're talking about, we'll save those for Ask the Expert at the end. So first up, we are going to hear from Anna at DHS. Then we will hear from Elena at ARM, Ben from NOS, John from Syngistics, Matt from McCarrick, Kathy from Savita in Red, Minnesota, and then our favorite Q&A from all of you. So first up, I would love to welcome Anna from DHS.
Thank you, Kiri. And I apologize. I'm in my car because I had a medical appointment I did not want to miss this morning, but I'm very happy to still be able to be with you guys through technology. I want to start by thanking the members of Minnesota NEET. It's important to note that all of the members of Minnesota NEET are volunteers. Minnesota NEET is completely volunteer-led, and DHS is just very thankful for the partnership that we have with them. Very excited about this topic today. It's a super important one for a couple different reasons. The first one being is it is such an increaser of people's independence. It is remarkable. I'm sure you'll probably hear a few success stories today, and there are so many more where that came from. Not only that, it is our number one solution to assist with the staffing crisis. So we know we have to do things differently than what we have been because we just are not going to have enough people to care for the number of people needing assistance. So we have to figure out how to prioritize who needs in-person support and who can utilize remote support safely and successfully. So yeah, those are a couple big reasons. We've had sorry for the shakiness. We've had CMS approval to deliver 27 of our waiver services, either in person or remotely, since the end of 2021. Throughout 2022, there was a rolling implementation period where anybody using remote support under the public health emergency should have transitioned over to the remote support policy that we have in place and approved by CMS. There's modifiers to use to indicate this, and that will help you get credit for your lead agency providing remote support. DHS has goals around increasing remote support, and we use the modifiers to determine the amount of remote support that's happening and in which services and which lead agencies and all of that. And so there's not the rate is the same, whether delivered in person or remotely. The modifiers are not for that. It's purely to be able to get data around remote support utilization. Because like I said, DHS has goals to increase that. I have a few notes to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there and hand it over to the rest of the presenters. And I'm going to need to drop off from the webinar. Usually I stay on to help answer questions. But I've been presenting with the members of Minnesota NEAT for many years, and you can trust that the answers that you receive from them are correct, and that if there is a question that they are not able to answer, they always send those my way. So you can rest assured that the responses you are receiving are 100% accurate. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Anna. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Now we are going to hear from Elena Gallagher from ARM, chatting a bit more about remote supports.
Thank you, Carrie. Well, I'm very excited to be here as always. I love talking about technology. It's always the best topic, in my opinion. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is kind of give some clarification. We get a lot of questions about what is remote support, what is remote monitoring, how are they authorized, things like that. So I wanted to provide some clarification and hopefully a little bit of information that will be useful for you if you're pursuing either of these options for people that you support. So first off, both of them basically mean the same things in the way that we talk about them. So today, you will probably mostly and in general hear us refer to it as remote support. That does cover what we consider remote monitoring in the state based on the way that we look at that definition. And that's just basically providing services remotely, which is in the name. So it's when you have an off-site caregiver who's using that technology to be able to meet that person's care plan and provide the services that they still need, but doing that in that unique way using that technology and with that offsite responder. As I mentioned, these terms are two that you will hear. They're kind of used interchangeably in the state. However, there is a little bit of a differentiation in how they might be billed. Remote monitoring tends to have more of a feel for like when you actually have like a dedicated remote response center that might be receiving the notifications and alerts. So it's typically more associated with remote service delivery in residential settings. So along the lines of remote support authorization, so this is again remote support specifically in the state, and I'm so sorry that it's fairly confusing. Remote support, again, is also an umbrella term that can be used for both remote support and remote monitoring. But when you're specifically looking at remote support itself, it is a method of delivering an approved service. And I've got the links. All of the slides that we're presenting today from myself and all of the presenters will be shared along with the recording. So you'll be able to access this and get these links and resources that we're sharing in these slides as well. But you can click on the CBSM remote support page or visit that yourself directly, and that's going to show you which services are approved to be delivered remotely. When doing traditional remote support in that manner, you will note on that page which ones will be authorized using a U4 modifier. This is through the standard MMIS claims system. And the process for doing that, it just must be clearly documented in the person's support plan, and you need to get consents from the individual or their guardian to use remote support services. Now, when it comes to remote monitoring, this is where it's just submitted a little bit differently. It's actually done right through the RMS. And what providers will do is they're actually going to use a rate management worksheet to track the hours that they're delivering in person, overnight, and remote. So you've got kind of three options, and they'll list out the hours of how that service is going to be delivered through that rate management worksheet. These worksheets are then submitted to the lead agency for review, and it's processed and paid for through that rate system for the provider. So there are a few I would definitely recommend. I've got, again, a resources document that has all of these different links where you can find them and determine when you would be using the remote monitoring through the rate management worksheet authorization versus that U4 modifier. Now, with remote overnight supervision, or ROS, some of you may recall or may still be calling it or hearing it called AOST, which was Alternative Overnight Supervision with Technology. That has actually officially gone away. There is no AOST anymore in the state of Minnesota. That was legislation that was passed back in 2023. And it removed a licensing requirement that went along with that AOST. So it is now officially called Remote Overnight Supervision. Again, this is primarily done in residential settings and would be through that rate management worksheet and tracked that route. There are some additional requirements for specifically remote overnight supervision. So again, that supervision that's done remotely in the nighttime hours only. Daytime, you don't have to go through this. Daytime is what I said before, just updating the individual's plan and receiving consents. For remote overnight supervision, there are the following requirements. And I'm not going to dive into these too much because one of our presenters later, Kathy Larson, will be talking about this a little bit more in depth. But these are the requirements for implementing ROS. And when you notify, this is a really important note, when you're notifying DHS about the ROS, since that is a requirement, what they have decided is that you will be notifying your county licensor before starting ROS. Now, what that means, I have it big and bold here, is that the county licensor only needs to be informed. Since this is no longer a licensing requirement, there is no license, all of that, they are not approving or denying remote support. They are being informed. You do have to attest that you've met all of those requirements, these ones that I mentioned, in your notification to the county licensor, but you are able to begin providing those remote support services as soon as that notification has been sent. So again, you do not need to wait for your licensor to say yes or no. They should not be saying yes or no because they are not approving or denying it, as there is no licensing requirement. And this has been a transition, and everybody is learning these changes. So if you come across any confusion with that, if you yourself are a licensor and you have questions and would like to reach out to me about that, certainly feel free to do so. We are always happy to help with this, especially when we're in transition, moving away from something that used to be a pretty heavy licensing involvement for a service. So there is a remote overnight supervision notification form that DHS created that you can use to submit to the county licensor. It's pretty straightforward. It's nice. It just does the contesting that you met everything you needed to, a little bit of a checkbox. And then you don't need to provide any of these documents at that time. You're just saying, yes, we have them, they are available. And then the licensing team has some follow-up work that they do in the background. Now, they can certainly request to have a visit and see remote support in action. But again, that's not something that that you have to wait for that visit. There's no authorization or approval on their end. Lastly, regarding rates, so obviously, as with most services, the individual can use remote support or monitoring that meets and maintains within their budget. But the important thing to note is that because remote support is considered a method of delivering an existing service, it's not a service itself, the units of the approved service are paid at the same rate, whether that service is in person or remote. Now, for that remote monitoring portion for delivering services in residential settings, it's important to note that you do not get reimbursed for taxes and benefits. So it is a little bit of a lesser rate. Lastly, I mentioned you will receive this slide deck, which has the links for the things I mentioned, some additional resources that can be helpful for looking at remote support, some examples of remote support videos, remote support in action. And then lastly, my contact information will be available as well in case anybody wants to reach out with any questions. Thanks so much, and I will hand it over to the next presenter.
Thank you, Elena. We do have one question for you, if you're
Yeah, absolutely.
Kathy answered it in the chat, but I'm guessing more people have this question.
Yeah.
Who notifies DHS and the licensor? So,
Oh, yeah.
couple slides, the case manager or the provider?
So the provider will notify the county licensor. You should be working with the case manager the whole time throughout that process because you do need to update the care plan. But when it comes to the actual notice to the county licensor, that is up to the provider to submit that notification.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Okay. Up next, we have Ben, the Director of Special Projects at NOS.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to make sure, Kiri, that we can see the slides before I continue on.
Yeah, it's looking great.
Alrighty, thank you. So thank you to Anna and Elena for giving us some insight into how it works from the regulatory perspective. That's very helpful. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the a certain style, I suppose, of remote monitoring that you can receive in the state of Minnesota. So this is called an easy way to think of it is third-party remote monitoring. So that's where the technology and the service provided is provided by a remote monitoring provider. So in that situation, a residential provider would subcontract with the remote monitoring provider to provide that real-time service where the technology connects the individual to someone who is providing the service remotely. The name that I will be using to refer to the people who work remotely is a remote support professional or RSP. So if you hear that, that's what I'm referring to. It's the person on the other end of the technology who is receiving information in real time. And then if we continue. So another thing I wanted to talk about are remote monitoring service areas. So when a lot of people think about, potentially replacing, in-person staff with technology, I know a lot of times the first thing they think of is all the things that technology can't do, right? You can't toilet bathe, you can't take someone on a community outing and help them navigate through these social situations in real time, at least not yet with technology. But what can remote monitoring do actually? Like, where can it help? So, a big one that we see and a really easy one to sort of understand conceptually is medication self-administration. So, a lot of folks want to be able to take their meds more independently, and there's tons of technology out there that can help them do that. And then, while this is often available as like off the shelf or standalone devices, it can also be integrated into remote monitoring systems so that if, for example, an individual has a device where if they don't take their medication at the appropriate time, the RSP, that person on the other end of the technology who is monitoring in real time, would get an alert, and then they would be able to, reach out to the individual, reach out to that backup person, as the case may be. So that's one area where remote monitoring really flourishes. Another is routine management. And I don't mean this in the sense of like apps, though I'm sure that there are remote monitoring providers who do have applications that help individuals manage their own routines. What I mean more of is there is something to be said about the satisfying quality of a living space where you feel like you own your front door, you're taking control as a person with a disability. And a lot of times, if individuals feel like they don't need that in-person staff for a certain amount of time, making sure they're still supported with remote monitoring technology is a great way to allow them to sort of set up, their evening, how they would like to set it up. I want to brush my teeth at this time, or I want to be able to brush my teeth whenever I want to brush my teeth, and I don't want to set up a routine. So, in this way, you're giving someone space in their own home to begin to make decisions for themselves, as to when they want to accomplish activities of daily living. And in that way, they're able to manage their routine more to their own satisfaction. And then another one that, we know that a lot of times staff are helping individuals with like discrete things like activities in the home, but often there's like a supervisory aspect. A person might have concerns about, they might have health and safety concerns if they go out into the community without the appropriate supports. So, one example is elopement mitigation. I'm sure some of the other folks that are presenting today, the other panelists, will talk about this capability as well. But remote monitoring has the ability to help mitigate that because a lot of times staff are there in part to supervise and ensure that a person isn't putting themselves or others in harm's way. And so with door sensors put on external doors, just like the security, and we'll show them in a following slide, you're able to detect if doors are opening in the home at certain times, and in that way help mitigate those elopement situations. Another big one is kitchen safety. So, a lot of people want to learn to cook more independently, and oftentimes they struggle with, maybe leaving the stove on too long. So we have sensors that can help detect when a stove is on too long, and the same situation where, if it goes, 30 minutes where the stove is on, an alert gets sent to the RSP, that person on the other side of the technology, and then they're able to reach out to the individual and say, "Hey, could you make sure that you turn the stove off?" And in that way, they're able to do more, try out more things, take more responsibility, but also do so safely. And the same thing with visitor safety. A lot of times people have concerns with letting strangers in or, not behaving appropriately with people who do come to the door. And so there are different technologies, devices, and like plans that can be set up to help people be more safe when they're dealing with visitors. Another common one is sleep monitoring. So some people might have concerns with just getting up in the night when they should be sleeping. This can be for a variety of reasons. You can imagine it's very serious if it's someone with Prader-Willi who's getting up to eat in the middle of the night, but for someone who just has work the next day and it might be better for them to go to sleep, there's different ways that we can track that sleep activity to help the providers and the case managers and the whole team be able to support the person in recommending when they get the sleep that they need. Another big one, and these are the last two, is there's been an explosion in wearable technology. I myself wear an Apple Watch, so I'm a participant in this as well. But the capability of these technologies to detect falls and seizures has grown immensely, and so we've seen a lot of integration into these remote monitoring systems of these wearable technologies that help individuals who might have mobility issues and be a fall risk or be prone to seizures and would need a specific protocol to be executed if a seizure were detected. And then I wanted to broadly talk about remote monitoring technology. I know other folks are going to talk about it as well, but it sort of helps me to think of it in three distinct categories. So these aren't hard and fast rules, by the way. These are just general groupings. So there's safety and oversight technology that can be in the individual's home who's using remote monitoring. And this would be things like door sensors, motion sensors, smoke detectors. That at the bottom right is a flood sensor, so that could be placed in a bathroom to make sure that nothing's overflowing. And then you have communication. So these are things like, the central hub where all the technology in the home talks to the hub, and then that hub communicates in real time to that RSP at that separate location. You also have tablets where you can do two-way audio video communication, pendants where you can reach out to a person even if you're not by any of the door sensors or what have you, and then a mobile PERS unit which is another avenue where individuals can talk directly via two-way to a remote support professional. And then the third group, general grouping, is assistive technology. So these are like integrations with other standalone devices, kind of like I was talking about. So one that's popular is like the medication dispensers, like a dose medication dispenser, which is something that can be used to help an individual self-administer their medications. It's pre-filled by a staff person or a nurse, but they're able to take those medications independently. You can use that on its own, but also when it's a part of a remote monitoring setup, you have those real-time alerts going to that RSP so that follow-up actions can occur if those medications aren't taken on time. And then very briefly, I wanted to give a sort of illustration of what remote supports looks like because I feel like it's helpful in explaining sort of how this works. So at the very basic level, there's the individual, there's the technology, and then there's the RSP, the person on the other end of that technology. And in a third-party situation, like I described, that would be a separate remote monitoring provider. And so through this technology, information is flowing from the individual in their home to this RSP, right? And so they're seeing this information in real time. And then you can also add other technology in the home. And in that way, the RSP is able to communicate back to the individual in real time. So there's this two-way flow of information happening with all the potential devices and sensors that are around the home. And so I wanted to give an example of what it might look like based on a specific two people's needs, two housemates who live in a home together. So this is a floor plan of a hypothetical apartment, right? And we have Bill and James, two best friends living together, and they want to use remote monitoring. They want to be a little more independent. So what's the first thing that needs to be looked at? The first thing is, what do they want to achieve with remote monitoring? This is the independence that Anna talked about, but then also what are some of their concerns, some of those risks that may have been identified? So for Bill, he wants to cook independently, self-administer his meds, but he has some seizure concerns. And for James, he wants to accomplish chores more independently. He also wants to self-administer his meds, but he has some sleep concerns. So what can remote monitoring do? How can the technology be arranged in the home? Well, you can start with a base unit that, all the subsequent sensors and devices will communicate to. And then you say, okay, we'll use a medication self-administration device like a dose for each of them. And the reason I show two of them is to illustrate the fact that these can be set up, Bill could have meds he takes once a day, and it's always in the morning at a specific time, and he could have, 45 minutes to take those meds. James, on the other hand, could have 3 doses he needs to take every day. And he has a 10-minute window, and that's it. These are just hypotheticals, but I'm saying that's the level of control we have over when we reach out. In those situations, the RSP reaches out to the individual or accomplishes other tasks related to these thresholds that we set up. It's very personalized. That's the thing I want to get through here, is it's all very person-centered. And so we could also add a tablet, a two-way tablet. That's for James who wants to accomplish those chores more independently. He can reach out if he has a question about, how hot does the mop bucket water have to be to mop my floor? Any sort of question like that they have, they can reach out in real time to this remote support professional. But then it can also be used along with this heat sensor that would be placed near the stove to help Bill cook more independently. So you have sensors that can perform multiple different functions in the home based on the needs of the specific people. So again, just illustrating the variability. And then for those seizure concerns, we would give Bill a watch, a smartwatch that has seizure detection. And that way, if it detects a seizure, it can send an alert to that RSP in real time, and then they can act on that notification. If it's a seizure that lasts more than however many minutes, they can contact EMS directly. If it's just a normal seizure that is expected to be seen throughout the day, then they can just report it or contact a backup person. And then for James's sleep concerns, we can include like a bed occupancy sensor, right? So, he gets into bed, it detects that presence when he gets up, an alert would be sent. So my hope is that this gives you an idea of the variability and the customizability of these remote monitoring setups. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a one person, gets the standard set of devices. It is very much what are you trying to achieve and what are the concerns and how can we arrange technology within that particular setting to ensure that they achieve those goals of greater independence. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to John with Syngistics, who is going to talk a little bit more about remote monitoring.
Talking to folks who will see this.
Hey, Jen, we're kind of having a hard time with your audio, actually.
Is that better, Elena?
Yeah, a little bit. Try again.
Good. Oh, geez.
Let's give it one more test.
There's been something. Is that working any better?
Yes, that is working better.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Then we can have you
Alright.
pull up your slides.
Awesome. See the screen?
All right,
So
great.
are you able to hear me?
It's a little bit choppy, but we can hear you better.
All right. Let's see. All right, so I'm here. I'm the operations director for Syngistics. Okay, nice. So, we've been in service since 2008. So I'm going to focus our attention on expanding or continuing what Ben had discussed. With delivering services remotely in Minnesota, I'd like to view it as a paradigm or a continuum of options for providers, starting with very low tech technologies, just with landline phones and cell phones, to remote monitoring services such as Night Owl and Syngistics does on the other end of the extreme of options for providers. Um, I'm going to start with remote alert sensor systems. And this is a product and similar to stuff that Ben showed you, where in environments, you're going to use traditional pendants and other alert option buttons to alert responding staff, friends, neighbors, loved ones of behaviors and activity that they need to be aware of, or inactivity that they also need to be aware of. This is just a quick slide of a sensor platform with a hub and some of the possible items that may be as part of that system. And we don't recommend there be kits, but rather that the environment and individuals' needs and concerns are assessed in that environment and that for solutions that involve technology. Again, just some close-ups of some basic environmental alerts sensors such as motion sensors, door or contact sensors. Contact sensors are very flexible in that they can be used for anything that has an open and closed function So for obviously a window or a door, but we'll also use these on refrigerators, cabinets, med cabinets, again, other devices that clearly open and close, where you want an indicator of behavior for those devices or items. So the remote alert sensor system is a support staff, patient individual, like in having staff ready to respond, or excuse me. Uh, it's, again, the individual environmental activity alert, where you need staff to have presence or response. And so we see this used for environments that are hard to supervise, maybe with multiple floors, where you want these environmental alerts to go to a staff that's maybe in the basement but needs to attend to something that's on the upper level of the house. And then again, we also will have this remote alert sensor system used for providers that are doing ROS. So again, it allows those remote staff in those 2 or 3 different locations to be aware of environmental and individual activity that they need to attend to that's documented within that plan. Individuals, again, are going to have their own way of contacting that system of their need for staff presence or checking in. Again, we'll also use motion and bed sensors to document and possibly other activity in that location. We can also use devices to verify staff behavior, time stamping, when those staff have been in areas. We need to again indicate that they've responded to a pendant, responded to a bed alert, alternative ways that they can again timestamp their response to that alert. Again, we've talked about where some of these items might be able to go. Bed and chair sensors for alerts preventing falls. Again, various ways that you can use a contact sensor to alert staff or document data in an environment, as well as motion sensors in an environment. We use these to supplement elopement issues. So instead of in our system waiting until the front door sensor goes off, we would have them alerting when the hallway motion, for example, goes off during an overnight to alert staff if there's activity that they need to attend to prior to the possible elopement. Just examples of bed and
John,
chair sensors.
super quick interruption. We're still having some issues with your audio. We're getting probably about 95% of what you're saying, but it's really choppy. I'm gonna maybe ask, can you cut your video? We might be able to get a more clear audio stream then, if it's like, in case it seems like it's a signal related issue.
Sure.
All right, thank you so much. Hopefully that'll work.
We'll see. I do live in
yeah.
the middle of nowhere in Minnesota.
Well, and it always is, right? That guaranteed we will have some tech issues during a tech related presentation. So sorry it fell during yours.
It did. That's too bad. I apologize. Let's see, I'll just move along real quick. Again, some other examples of devices that can be a part of our sensor platform. Incontinence pads that sense moisture, again, allowing there to be an early response to incontinence rather than delaying somebody having their bed changed, avoiding bed sores and other health conditions. We have supplemental smoke detectors that allow, again, for remote responding staff to be alerted to, again, that event in a location. Toilet flushers, rapid muscle motion sensors for beds. This little puck we can configure to be to sense flooding in the floors or temperature changes in a room or on a stove. We also, in this sensor platform, it has a fall detection pendant as well that's available. addition to the sensors that remote staff get to alert them of individual and environmental issues that they need to respond to, we do have customers that will install cameras so that that remote staff can triage that event or those alerts remotely. We have folks that will use security level cameras as well as simple two-way tablets to do that. Again, simple security level cameras offer high level of HIPAA security as well as data retrieval for investigations, in addition to the ability to triage remotely. And then again, two-way tablets are used between responding staff in an environment. And then in the case of Syngistics, where we do provide remote monitoring services, where we do the two-way talking with two-way tablets as well. And so again, the next step on the paradigm, as it were, again, beyond the remote alert systems would be the remote monitoring services such as Ben has uh, pointed to. It's also something that we see as a way to supplement our the ability to manage and to monitor locations remotely. So again, those same sensors and alerts are sent to remote monitoring service stationed with professional RSPs who then are following care plans and responding and interacting and or triaging the alert if needed. So I think that is all that I've got. Sorry for the audio quality. And I'd be happy to take any questions offline, Elena, if they came up or if I missed something.
Thank you, John. That was fantastic. And honestly, we could hear you a lot better after we turned off the video. So no worries at all. Thanks. Up next, we have Matt, CEO and owner of Mercaric. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time this morning to discuss assistive technology with us. Anna, starting the call, had thanked the Minnesota NEAT Group for its volunteering and its work with assistive technology, and I'd like to kind of turn that around and really express my appreciation to DHS and the case managers and the service providers as well. Assistive technology is scary, and working with it the first time and working with people, it can be difficult the first couple of times that you're doing it. And we can sit here and talk about it all we want, but we're not going to make much headway without your support and you all giving it a try. So thank you so much. And I think we've found, for the case managers and service providers on the call who have given it a try, they can't live without it now, which is just wonderful. So my segment today is talking about off-the-shelf technology. And I think it's important to note that not all, but most of the assistive technologies, remote monitoring technologies that have been talked about today, as an individualized solution, can be found off the shelf. Now, I'd also like to go back and say, this should always be a discussion with a professional to make these decisions first. There is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Syngistics and NOS have spoken today, and both did a wonderful job as always. But there are differences between the companies, and there are other companies as well. So having a discussion with each one of those companies, as well as an assistive technology professional, you can really come to the best solution for the person supported uh, and the company. So when we're talking about off-the-shelf solutions, we can meet a lot of these needs, not fully, but individually. Kind of shown here are two separate, very common systems that are being used: the Samsung SmartThings system and the Ring system. Both of them are available piecemeal and off the shelf or in kits. They're easy. The biggest benefit to an off-the-shelf solution is going to be price. Generally, there's not going to be a continued monthly fee as there is with remote monitoring. But again, with remote monitoring, I am a huge fan of the companies that are presenting today as well as others. And when in a licensed facility and working with multiple individuals, I am always, almost always going to say, go with one of those. That's true also in non-licensed facilities at times, but when we're talking about family caregivers and children or seniors potentially, we may not need the documentation available, all of the different components available with the systems talked about today. So we might be able to go with a lower price system. So I'm not going to dig too far into each one of these. Just please note that there are available systems with contact sensors, motion sensors, and the like available off the shelf. NomoCare Smart or Nomo Smart Care and AlloCare systems are kind of changing a little bit, and with these each do have a lower monthly fee, but are going to provide a lower level of care than the other systems, but they're more targeted. So, for example, the NomoCare does have the open and close sensor, a motion sensor, and now has just a simple call out button and can detect patterns within the home if a person is changing their different routines. So this is going to be a good system for, let's say grandma is living in her house, she's doing her thing, and we just want a way for her to reach out. We want to know if some doors are opened and closed. We want to know if she's moving around in a certain area. Wonderful. Not going to give the level of care, but it's going to meet our needs for a lower needs situation. Next to that, the AlloCare system, another very cool system where we can verbally call out for help. We can also, this is also paired with can be paired with an external PERS pendant that the person can use outside in the community. It will also detect patterns and motion within the house, so we can find out, well, very similar in many aspects to the NomoCare system. There are very many more differences in these two systems. And again, before choosing one, I would suggest speaking with an assistive technology professional and saying, okay, which one of these is going to fit the needs of the person I support? Those are only two of the systems that do that kind of monitoring, but I'm using these as examples today. Nobi, can anybody spot the sensor in these pictures? And I ask that question knowing full well that none of you can talk right now. Okay, hint, it's hanging on the ceiling. So the sensor that we're using here is embedded in the light. And what this sensor does is it has fall detection capabilities. It will, on through the application, can show basically a stick figure walking around the house, and it gathers the data from that stick figure. So, or it can be a live view too, but I don't like the live view with the camera because we want to give people dignity or allow them the dignity that they deserve inherently. And it's information that we don't need. We don't need to see their face because we generally know who's in the home. So a stick figure in the house, it can learn patterns through sort of an artificial intelligence and alert caregivers off-site if those patterns change. It can also detect a fall. So if that stick figure goes down hard, it's going to be able to reach out to the caregivers identified. Another aspect of it very quickly is it's got a motion sensor in it. So if we're going to put one of these in the living room, we can put them in each room of the house. Hallways, bedrooms, bathrooms, there are different designs to the fixtures, so it's not a one size fits all. So we can know when a person's moving from room to room. But that motion light will also just automatically turn on the light if we need light, so we're not in fear of tripping on different things. Thank you, Elena. It would not be a monitoring presentation without talking very briefly just about, or just noting, PERS units and location devices. These are the quickest, easiest, least expensive, frankly, solutions to help a person out. And I think we found during COVID, 1,000 of these things went out the door overnight from, or 1,000,000 from 100 different companies, because we needed to be able to get a hold of people. They needed to be able to get a hold of us very easily. And we've stopped saying this a little bit. It's something that I said in presentations 2 years ago. We were fooled the first time with when COVID came and we couldn't get to people and we couldn't reach them and we didn't know that they were safe. So, okay, we were blindsided by that one. But now, if something happens again, shame on us. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, we should be able to get a hold of these things. So, even if it's putting in a smaller off the shelf system in the interim and spending the lower dollars, so if a problem occurs, then we can handle it. And then going ahead and when we identify higher needs, going with a higher price system. Now, I'm not saying don't go with Syngistics and NOS first, because so many times we absolutely know that that's needed. But going ahead and putting something in place. I use the example quite often of somebody says, I don't think I need a PERS unit or a fall detection pendant because I haven't fallen yet. Well, if you're falling down every day, the emergency response pendant isn't the solution anymore. Now we're talking about a chair or moving into uh, a group living setting. A pendant is going, or watch is going to be something just in case. So kind of next slide. That's kind the same idea with an angel sense pendant or a geobit. And I'm not going to go into the differences of each one of these as well, because again, I encourage you to speak with a assistive technology professional, because sometimes a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? We think we have um, good luck with an angel sense pendant, so we think that everybody needs an angel sense pendant. Not the case. They are wonderful devices, but there are different devices that are going to be best for different people. And to kind of wrap up everything that I'm talking about here is call Elena. Send an email to Elena. If you are having questions about assistive technology, and I know she's going to send out her contact information at the end here. I can't count how many times I've gotten an email from her with 2 other people copied on it, 2 other vendors saying, do you guys want to talk about this and figure out who this is going to be best for? And Ben and I haven't had these conversations often. John and I have at this point, and that's simply because Ben is newer into his position. Very qualified, just newer into his position. Where I talk to John and I say, do you think you guys are better to support this, or do you think we're better to support this need? But instead of picking, going ahead and getting in touch with Elena is always a very, very good start. The last thing I'll say on the many, and I'm repeating, but many of these individual technologies, and the reason that I think of this is the dose medication dispenser, because it's been talked about in conjunction with many of these systems. If we believe that medication management is the only issue that we're facing currently, we can get the medication dispenser and it can have many of those functions without being involved in a larger system. And I will stick around in case there are any questions.
Thank you, Matt. We do have one question for you. Someone asked, does Mercaric have any type of pamphlet or brochure for case managers to utilize with an extensive list of companies and devices along with their capabilities?
We do not. And the reason that we do not is first, companies, capabilities, technology changes so fast that that list would have to be updated constantly. Also, though we love every one of the companies on this call, there may be a company left off of that list that may actually be the best thing for the person supported. So I don't want to advertise partnerships with a company where it may be most useful to use something else.
That's a perfect explanation. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Up next, we have Kathy, the Director of Remote Supports and Assistive Technology at Savita and REM of Minnesota.
All right. I'll go ahead and get started. So some of the information that is going to be on these slides has already been gone through by the other presenters. And so I may skip through them a little fast, but I'm going to focus mostly on the things that from a CRS provider perspective, you might want to be aware of and to know. So I am going to make sure we can flip here. There we go. All right, so Anna went through earlier why it's so important for us to incorporate technology. And I think as providers, we are all feeling this crunch of not only the staffing shortage, but also a lot of individuals who want that level of independence that they've never been able to have before. And now that we have technology, it certainly is something that we want to discuss and need to discuss. We realize that at every 45-day meeting, an annual meeting, we have to have that discussion about technology. So it's a great opportunity for us to not only discuss assistive technology, but the possibility of remote supports. So I know both Ben and John did a great job of describing what remote supports are, but Anna Elena as well went through it a little bit. But just basically, again, it's the provision of a covered service by staff or caregiver who's in a remote location and is engaged with a person through enabling technology. So all the technology that Matt went through and Ben and John went through, using that technology to have some type of live two-way communication. And live two-way communication does not need to be a verbal communication. Live two-way communication can be with sensors, with different alerts that is letting us know what's going on in that particular home. So we use that enabling technology to have that live two-way communication. And some of the potential devices are what John and Ben went through. Two-way audio video devices, smoke detectors. Really, we look at putting into place the different devices that are needing for that person's unique needs. In fact, as we go through the process, we would want to do an assessment, a needs assessment, to determine what are the needs for this individual during that time period in the overnight if we're going to be using this for remote overnight supervision. Once we determine what those needs are, we uniquely pull in what's needed for that particular home. Years and years ago, there were smart homes put up that had every bell and whistle necessary or available at the time, and that's just not necessary. Over-teching a house is not necessary. You really want to look at what is the need and what devices are necessary to support that person and that particular need. So essentially, remote overnight supervision, again, uses that combination of the technology and or offsite staff to support the individual's safety and daily needs. Those offsite staff are available to answer any calls from an individual. And when I say staff, it doesn't necessarily have to be my staff as a CRS provider. I may be using NIDAL or Syngistics live staff to be the first line of intervention, meaning that the devices would alert that agency and they would be looking at what's happening. And then they would, with our backup plan, we would have them notify us if we actually needed to be on site in person. So they let us know when and where we need to be in person, thus providing the right support at the right time. So one important thing to always remember, especially as you're communicating the possibility of doing remote overnight supports, or remote supports or remote overnight supervision is it's not the physical absence of a care, it's, excuse me, it is the physical absence of a caregiver, but not the absence of supervision. Supervision is still being provided to that particular home or CRS agency, but that is just not being provided in person. So it's still something that is happening. That supervision is happening. There are different scenarios to bring in remote supports within a CRS. You could be using it for remote overnight supervision, a traditional way of providing technology to support the person during certain sleep hours that somebody might be needing just to be kind of monitored. Or you could be using that remote supervision during day hours. Like we said, it was never something we ever had to be licensed for. And now we don't have to be licensed for either overnight supervision or supervision during the day if we're using remote supports. The other way we've used it is we've used remote support technology to supplement the need for double staffing. There's some environments where we've required or needed two staff persons for whatever reason, and we've been able to move to one staff person on site and technology supports as the secondary staff person. So we've been able to do that in certain circumstances where it's necessary. The other thing we look at sometimes is using remote support technology or devices to support moving away from an awake sleep staff to a awake overnight staff to a overnight staff. And using the technology, it will wake up the staff person when they really do have to be up and dealing with or working with a particular situation. So we're moving from an awake overnight staff to a sleep overnight staff. And as some of us people who work in the CRS field, sometimes it's easier to find a sleep staff than it is to find an awake staff that will be there awake all night long. So we want to make sure that we're looking at those. The other thing I didn't put in here that we might use technology in a CRS for is helping our staff be able to provide the best care for the individual, especially around medical or behavioral challenges that might come up. Medical issues could be they're at high risk for a fall. And so we want to know when they're starting to get out of bed so our staff can get there right away to intervene before they would fall. Or somebody trying to get out of a wheelchair. We want technology to let us know if they're trying to get up and out of that chair so we can intervene quickly. And or letting us know if an individual has a bedding that needs to be changed because it's been wet or something like that to make sure they're not laying in some type of wet bed all night long. So there's many ways for us to use assistive technology to help us do a really good job of caring for the individuals we're caring for. A few other things from a CRS perspective that I want you to be aware of. So, if you're looking at putting into place the remote overnight supervision, there are some specific requirements that you would want to pay attention to. Obviously, our 245D licensing guidelines outline the things that need to be in place when you are doing remote overnight supervision. But these I wanted to go through just a little bit so you have some awareness of what those things might be. Number one, developing a policy and procedure for remote overnight supervision. So the policy within it needs to dictate and discuss protecting the health, safety, and rights of the individual. It also helps us explain the discharge process if a person requires in-person supervision. So they've already been maybe utilizing remote overnight supervision, but now they're no longer appropriate for that. What is the process or what are we going to do if that occurs? It also has to ensure services may not be terminated due to decline to provide consent. So, as we're setting up remote overnight supervision, if an individual does not want it, we cannot decline them from our service because we want to do remote support in that particular home. So, we can't look at discharging them or anything like that. They have the right to stay in that home and not have remote overnight supervision. We also need to explain a backup system for if the system fails or something breaks down. We have to explain how we're going to train our staff on the system. We have to establish a plan for emergency response personnel to get to the site in the event of an emergency. And then we also have to discuss when no presence is needed within a 3-month period of time, how we will conduct a response drill. So the response drill, or we call them technology drills, we do them every 3 months just to ensure that the response is appropriate and that the technology is all working as we would expect it to be. Although I'll tell you the truth is that all of the systems that we might utilize from Nidal or Syngistics, they alert us if for some reason the system is not functioning on that particular night. So we would know in advance if a system's not functioning as we expect it to be so that we can get it corrected immediately. Some other things to be aware of is we do have to have the signed consent forms for every individual that's going to be using remote supports. We have to have a support plan addendum put into place, which includes the team determined maximum response time and specific ROS related considerations. So that being, we as a team decide how long can we go or do we need to go until a staff person would have to be on site in the event of emergency. So this could be 10 minutes for that emergency response staff person to be there, or is it longer? It's determined by the team, and it could be 20 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. There's so many considerations and factors in determining how long till that staff person would be needing to be on site. At the same time, we do have to be assessing whether somebody needs to be there quicker than that maximum response time. And if so, our response usually is to call EMS and get them in there immediately, and or the remote support company, if they are our first line of intervention, maybe calling EMS even before we are calling EMS. So we have kind of a double system to ensure that that response is being attended to if necessary. So that is in our support plan addendum. And then the PAPP, we have to make statement in there that we're using that remote overnight supervision and the absence of on-site staff during designated time period. So what's the time period that we are using remote overnight supervision? We also, as a CRS, have to notify the county licensor of programs of our intent to start and or stop providing remote overnight supervision. So not only notify the county licensor that we are intending to start this service, but also notifying if we're intending to stop the service of providing remote overnight supervision with technology. And then I talked about a minute ago for if there is an incident, we do have to document an assessment of if an in-person support is needed sooner than that maximum response time. So when you look at developing your policies and procedures, though, nothing in 245D requires us as license holders to develop or maintain separate or duplicate policies, procedures, documentations, consent forms, or individual plans that may be required for other licensing standards. So if we already have some standardized processes that cover the key indicators or the key things within her, we wouldn't have to develop something different. I will tell you that recently, though, DHS has put out some sample forms for everything from policy to consent forms to the tracking of emergency drills. So there are some resources available, but if you already have your own processes in place, you don't have to flip to theirs, with the exception of there is now a form that we can utilize to notify the county licensor that we are going to be initiating and starting remote supports for overnight. Um, and then the last thing I want to spend some time discussing is having that conversation with families, with teams about the possibility of using remote overnight supervision. So, a lot of times starting the conversation, we walk into it without a lot of knowledge and information. And what I've found it is it's very helpful to come in having kind of some general understanding and background of how technology for overnight supervision can run, what that looks like. So you have to be prepared to discuss everything from what it might look to the worst case scenario, or what we call the what ifs. You know, what if there's a fire in the house? And that's always the number one thing people start to talk about. What if there's a fire? Or what if the individual needs help in the middle of the night? Or what if they fall and need assistance? So those what ifs are important because those are the things that worry people about what's going to happen or how will that be responded to. So being somewhat prepared or understanding how to prepare for those conversations is very helpful. The key things to leading that remote overnight supervision conversation is number one, take the lead. Be the one to initiate the conversation and don't wait for other people to bring it up. We are required to have that conversation, like I said, at the 45-day in the annual meeting. It may not always be around ROS, it may be around assistive tech, but knowing the individual and what they're capable of, it is a good place to start from. Also, bring the facts. And when I say bring the facts, what I mean is arrive with the data or the information. What is really happening on that overnight for the individuals in that home? Do they go to sleep at 9 o'clock and they sleep all night long and nobody ever gets up and nobody ever has any really need for an assistance? So that may be very helpful to bring in and say, we really don't have a need for doing anything except emergency response, which is what we can set up the technology to be able to do. So bring all the facts, the relevant information about what those needs are for the person. And when I talked about doing a needs assessment, this is where we also can bring those facts in about what's really going on that overnight. Um, Name the concerns. Have people tell you what their concerns are. What are their fears? What are the perceived vulnerabilities? And address them before they grow. Start to bring in people who can have conversations around how the technology works. So, bringing in John or bringing in Ben to talk about how their systems work to be able to have a better understanding. I find more often when I have people that are resistant to doing technology, it is because they really have a lack of awareness of the systems and how the technology works these days. They might think it's the same way as it was 5, 10 years ago, and it is not. There are a lot of advancements in technology that are happening all the time. So be honest about the current plan. So discuss what's working, what's not working, and where the gaps might exist so that you can try to fill those gaps and find the right technology for that person. Leverage your internal expertise. So maybe it's internal within your company and or external expertise such as, like I said, Ben or John or other agencies that can come in and give a demonstration or talk about how their systems work. Use ARM resources. ARM has some great videos out there. If you go onto the ARM Technology Resource Center on the ARM website, there are videos there that help demonstrate and talk about developing technology in the homes and how to have those conversations about technology possibilities. So sometimes what we might do also is pilot the experience. So we might have an area where, or a home where people are kind of concerned, but they're willing to give it a try and see how it works, but they don't want to take away staff yet. So we have put everything into place in a home so that we can demonstrate how it does work. And we've been able to, at the same time, have staff there. So we're using essentially two systems for a while as kind of a pilot. And even in those pilots, and as we get ready to switch over to using all remote overnight supervision, we've been able to kind of titrate the staff on site. So maybe staff is there for a couple hours and they leave for an hour and they come back for a couple hours so that we're able to look at how that could be utilized in that home and start to get people more comfortable and understanding of how the systems work. So piloting is a great way to just dip your toe into the possibility of using remote overnight supervision. And then co-create the path forward, collaboratively building that plan, which reflects everyone's input and priorities. I don't walk into a meeting with families and case managers without any knowledge about technology. We walk in with some ideas of how things might be addressed, but the plan forward does have to include everybody because we may not have thought about a piece of technology that might be necessary to the family or to the case manager, and we want to include everybody in that conversation. Let's see. And then lastly, I just want to state, remember, technology really does extend the reach of the caregiver. So it extends the reach of what us as CRS providers are able to do. It doesn't necessarily replace us completely. It allows us to really provide the right care at the right time for the individual. And so that we can look at how we can support that home as best as possible and allow the individuals to be as independent as possible. But that is it from me.
Thank you, Kathy. That was fantastic. Now we will move on to our Ask the Experts Q&A. So you, the audience, if you have any questions you would like to ask the folks who have presented today, we also have some Minnesota NEAT members who did not present but are here to answer questions, and longtime Minnesota NEAT members and assistive tech experts. Feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A. If typing in the Q&A doesn't work for you, we welcome you to use the raise your hand function and we will unmute you and you can ask your question by chatting as well.
So I see a couple of questions on here, and so I'll address them right away. So the DHS samples, yes, we can go ahead and add that to the website, the MnNEAT website, so you can pull those down and see what's there. And then the other one was speaker notes. Yes, we'll make sure that we can get some of those visual or speaker notes. Yes. We'll add that to what we send out later.
Perfect, thank you.
Or it's not sent out. I'm sorry, it's on the Minnesota NEAT website where they can download.
Yeah,
I'll
so
add super quick just for the links, the DHS sample forms that Kathy referenced. I'll actually also post those along with the recording of today's event, in addition to the slides that were shared today. So you'll have like all of the resources that we mentioned today. And those forms, they are kind of unique because they're basically online versions of PDF forms. So they might link a little funny. I would just recommend, if you do have kind of a system where it's linking a little funny on your end, just backtrack and search for the name of the form and put CBSM or Minnesota DHS. And you can usually find it that way. But I'll make sure that we get those. I'll also try to post them in the Q&A answered section here so you guys can get access to those today.
thank you, Elena. And Gigi says, thank you, I appreciate the resources. Matt, I had a question specifically for you that I think you would do a great job answering. I know when I was a case manager new to Minnesota, the process of figuring out assistive tech and remote support for people in Minnesota can be a little bit daunting as a case manager. And I specifically reached out to Mark Herrick when I was new to Minnesota as a case manager, looking for supports on that. Could you talk briefly about, if you're new to case management and new to figuring all of this out, a good way to go about it? I think that might help some of the people who maybe don't even know what to ask.
Sure. Thanks, Kiri. First off, feel free to give us a call. Feel free to give Elena a call. If you find another assistive technology professional, go ahead and just start the conversation with them. I think where Kiri might be going with this a little bit is asking for an assessment of needs for the person supported. And that's usually a good starting point. If we don't know what a person needs, we feel like they're in an unsafe situation or there are things that they need to do better, we don't know where to go with it. Calling and asking for an assessment and having a professional come in and really go through all of their needs is a wonderful thing. If you know that there is a specific need that a person has, feel free just to reach out again and say, we know this is the one particular need. What do you suggest? We're all very, very busy. Again, I'm in my car, and it would be funnier if she was still here, but I'm not being selfish and doing health needs. I'm actually on my way to see somebody. So if we don't need to go through an assessment, all the better, but that is a great place to start. Kiri?
That's perfect. Thank you. All right. It doesn't look like we have any other questions from the audience. Feel free to pop those in if you do have them. Do we have anything else from the panelists that you all would like to mention?
You know, I might, and Elena, you probably want to speak to this as well, but I know Elena's been putting together kind of a checklist for CRS providers on what they need to do. in order to set up remote overnight supervision. So just some of the things that I was talking about earlier. And so that will be real helpful. It's not complete quite yet. I know we're doing a couple little revisions to it, but that's going to be a real helpful tool. And I'm assuming, Elena, that's something that would be available on the website then as well eventually.
Yes, sorry, I was deep in finding these links to share out.
That's good. Thank you.
Yes, I will. It'll be something that I'll post on the website and then also have available probably through the ARM website as well. And if we get permission to share it early enough, I'll make sure that it's added along with all of the slides and things like that for today's webinar. But just check back maybe in, I would say, a month, because then we know for sure it'll be up there, just to make sure that you see that option list that Kathy was referencing.
Awesome, thank you. John, go for it, and then we have a couple questions in the Q&A.
Just to expand a little bit on when Matt was answering about assessments, and if folks aren't aware, McCarrick is one of maybe 2 or 3 companies that do assessments, and that's why Matt's so busy. But again, just to be clear, you do not have to have an assessment, and even if you are in queue to get an assessment, I would still recommend you reach out to Night Owl and Syngistics and McCarrick and ask to do a review of an environment. And really what you need is to bring what you've already got for a needs assessment. Because that's really where we start. We really don't start with technology. We start with what the concerns are, what the needs are. And then we're going to inform you then from there what we feel like in our wheelhouse will best meet those needs. And so I would encourage you to do that. And again, even teams that could meet with Night Owl and Syngistics and McCarrick, you would then be well informed as a team then on possible solutions to pursue.
Agreed. Just to jump in there, you do not need an assessment. It does not need to be done necessarily. I suggest it's done by an assistive technology professional, but if you know we're looking for remote monitoring, there are very intelligent people, both at NOS, at Syngistics, and other places. They will help lead you through this.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, a few questions from the chat. The first one, for any panelist who wants to answer: how do we know that the remote overnight supports are providing the supervision at all times of the night, like they say they are? We had an incident in a foster home in our region that had an overnight remote support and a fatal incident that happened outside the home because the emergency supports in place were not fast enough. First of all, I'm very sorry to hear that. That is quite a tragedy. And yes, we should make sure that the supports in place are adequate and actually happening. So
I might comment on that as well, just a little bit, Kiri. Yes, that is a terrible, terrible thing. And what I would say in regards to the remote support is you need to ensure that the plan is appropriate for the site. Is there's been some sites where teams will agree that an individual does not need to be followed up on certain things that the remote support company might be able to monitor. And there's and so because the team is feeling that it doesn't have to be monitored for a certain thing, it doesn't get responded to. Um, but on the remote support side, the ones that I've worked with, a lot of them have within their monitoring station cameras that are monitoring their monitors. So they are very vigilant to ensure that their staff are monitoring and responding to their systems, and they can follow up and check and see actually the data of when did the sensor go off and how quickly was it alerted to and how quickly did they notify us or the EMS systems. So you would want to ask and make sure that the system is appropriate for the individual and that the response plan is appropriate for the individuals in that particular home. And it's very individualized. I mean, I obviously can't speak to that incident or that thing that you had to experience, which would be terrible. But sometimes it's a matter of just really looking sure and making sure that you've got the appropriate plan for that particular home. I'm sure John and Ben can talk more to the backup systems that they have, if they are
Yeah.
using that type of I don't know if this home was using that, or if the provider was doing their own backup support. There are some systems like that as well.
Right. Just to add, one thing that I always refer back to was years ago, we did a white paper when alternative overnight supervision with technology was just going underway. And we recommended in that white paper, and I still believe it today, even though I really trust our technology and how it works, that locations should be doing regular testing of their systems. Whenever you're going live and unsupervised, in our white paper, we suggested doing that upon relieving staff of with technology that you're testing the system. 90% of the troubleshooting that we do with our technology is the power plug being unplugged, or the internet cable being unplugged, and now there's a laptop plugged into the spot. So those are unfortunately things that are sometimes the hardest things to troubleshoot, especially. But just doing simple tests of technology that you're relying on is recommended.
I would also like to add very briefly a little bit about what a lot of us have in place. I know John does, certainly at Syngistics, but like and I'm just speaking for Nos here. But like a lot of us pay attention to the redundancies and technical safeguards that we have in place at the monitoring station. So this is not just like a normal the remote support professionals, the people on the other side of that technology, aren't just working from, in our case, they never work from home. So I would be ineligible for that role since I'm a remote worker. They are always working from the secure facility. There is, like you said, Kiri, that camera. There's abilities for us to, or Kathy, sorry, that camera. There is the ability for us to go back and check response times for how quickly they're responding to these particular alerts. So there's ways that you can have that we can have internal direct supervision over the RSPs that are providing those supports, and any lapses like that are quickly remediated. I mean, that is obviously a terrible situation, and we hope that never happens ever with anyone. But in order to try to avoid situations like that from arising, we do have a backup generator in place so that if power goes out, this natural gas generator kicks on. We have battery backups so that the stations still have power until the generator kicks on, like we've thought through these things, redundant internet connections. So we have a lot of technical safeguards in place to ensure that there are no lapses in that supervision while it is supposed to be occurring.
Thank you, everyone. We have two more questions, so we'll hustle through them so we can send on time. The next one is pretty quick. Will all three remote support providers work in northern Minnesota?
I will say that we do.
Yeah,
Yes.
we do as well.
I'll also add, just to clarify, Mercaric themselves is not like the third party remote support vendor, like what John and Ben were talking about. Mercaric doesn't have like a monitoring station, but like Matt said, they can help you find the remote support agency that might be best, or help with some of those off the shelf. And there are a few other remote support vendors as well in the state that were not part of today's presentation. So just know that there are options out there, and they typically, those other organizations, including the ones that you got to hear from today, will generally serve the whole state. So if you have questions about them, like Matt said, you can always reach out to me. Otherwise, there are, I recommend just getting in touch with the different remote support vendors. Figure out which style you like, which organization you like, because everybody does things just a little bit differently. That's kind of the beauty of having choice.
Thanks, Elena. And I will say, I mean, clearly this group of folks here all gets along very well. We all do similar things, and just because we do the same work doesn't mean that we're big competitors and don't get along. Everyone is very collaborative. in this space that we work together in. All right, so the last question we have is, how can I, as a case manager, help to address concerns about going to assistive tech / remote supports from in-person supports, finding that in-person support is needed, and now in-person support / staffing is no longer available? So that was kind of a lot in one question, but really I think just helping address concerns about going towards assistive tech and remote supports.
I would say one of the big things is what Kathy kind of highlighted is starting the conversation from the perspective of, hey, this is what we know. These are the services that this person is currently receiving in person. Let's discuss, we don't have the staff, or this person has wanted to do things more on their own, or a big one that we didn't touch on as much today, maybe somebody's having increased behaviors. Now, I'm not a big fan of that term because, right, I think we all understand that behaviors are often a form of communication. What is that person trying to communicate? Oftentimes it's frustration with staff, frustration with being told to do things when they don't want to do them, or they don't want to do them that way, or whatever it is that's causing that. So looking at the person's situation, how cares are currently being delivered, and you are always welcome to reach out to one of us to even start saying, hey, here's what we're looking at. What exists out there? I don't even know, right? I don't know what could help with this situation that I'm looking at, but I do know I would like to consider technology as an option. I do know the person that I'm supporting would like to consider technology as an option. So you can work with a company like Mercaric or Live Life Therapy Solutions or Lighthouse Center for Vital Living or Connectability of Minnesota. Those are the 4 organizations that do in-person assessments. Those are in-depth, very thorough. They're professionals who make recommendations for technology. Or if you want to start, I do free case consultations. I've worked very closely in partnership with DHS. ARM has been a partner for many years now, and it's something that we've been so fortunate to have that partnership and see that support from DHS. But you can always reach out to me. We can do a free case consultation to discuss different options as well, if that will be easier to get started that route.
And one of the things I might add in, Elena, that I didn't mention earlier today is when we're having the conversation with families and especially, when we know that staffing is super low in that area and we're not able to locate staff, is really asking the question of everybody as what does that staff really do in the middle of the night? Sometimes the staff is there just for the just in case. They're sound asleep. And I say, if the individual were to get up and walk out of the house, how would our staff know? How would they know that? They may not, because the individual would, open up the locks and leave. So it's what would the staff do? So if there was a fire, what would the staff do? The staff would call 911. They would get the fire department there. They would, we want to see if there is a piece of technology or a response plan that can do the same things as the staff person would do if they were there in person. So the other example is if an individual's sick in the middle of the night, what would the individual do? Well, they'd probably go to where the staff is sleeping and wake them up. They can do the same thing with a two-way audio video device where they can go to that device and they can press it and somebody on the other end responds visually to be able to talk with them and find out what's going on. If they find out the individual's throwing up and has the flu, they then call our on-call staff who comes into the house and responds to assisting the individual with being sick that particular night. So it really is starting to ask those kinds of questions as you teach yourself and the individuals that you're working with, the families or the individual themselves, what can technology do and how would it do it if it was necessary?
Thank you. Okay, everybody. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us. We appreciate you and all of the questions you brought. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact us. I know we always volunteer Elena, but I'm going to volunteer her again. Feel free to email Elena, and she always finds us. And we will have this webinar recording as well as all of our resources posted on our website, mnneat.org. Reach out to us if you need anything else, and we will see you at our next quarterly webinar. Thank you.